Hi, this is KlueIQ Chronicles, Crime, Code, and Clues with your hostess, Alexandra Kitty. This is a special New Year's edition. I thought I would do a special episode here because it's a new year and there's a lot to be said and done. So every year when I used to blog, I would say, okay, this is the year of X, or this is the year of the woman, this is the year of all sorts of things. And I'm going to do it this year too. This coming year, we're going to see a lot of corrections. Things that were going off the rails in 2025 won't stay off the rails, manage to take us into completely different directions. We're already starting to see this with AI. It's transforming things. There's upheaval. And it's not just the upheaval, it's tearing down the mindset that social media cultivated for a generation. Because social media cultivated competitiveness, narcissism, greed, desperation, deception, all those things associated with wanting to show up other people and wanting to just to show off in general. But with the state of the economy, which is one thing, where people are not, with inflation and stuff, people can't keep up appearances much longer. It was very interesting. There was somebody griping about the Ontario government. Well, when will things change? And somebody goes, well, when we organize. And I thought, and I even said, organize who? The reason people want to organize is because they don't want to admit they're in a slump. So if you go up straight to a politician and say, listen, I'm not doing financially well because of you, what are you going to do about it? They don't want to show that they are struggling. So if they go one-on-one, they figure somebody else will be the brave soul and say, okay, we're not doing well. But they can hide anonymously and still post airbrushed selfies pretending that everything is okay. But when you're in a group, you're anonymous. So that's why people don't want to go to their politicians. Yeah, it could be part laziness, part fear, but it's mostly not being able to pretend that everything is okay to other people. Because they're afraid then somebody's going to say, well, what did you do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. How much, taxpayer money do you get to ride this limousine? Your office takes six figures to run with taxpayer dollars. How many events do you go to? What perks do you get? What expenses? I mean, when I did my, experiment looking at writing to 11 politicians in Canada saying, okay, what can you do? And nobody answered me. They're on the low end, cost these 11 politicians $7 million a year to run their office. Now you think that's an awful lot of money, but it's more than 7 million. This was on the low end. By the time you have pay a staff, by the time you get your supplies and you pad things and you go out to dinner and you don't pay for it. You don't pay for your hotel room. You don't pay for your dinners. You don't pay for your limo rides. Somebody else pays, and it's always the taxpayer. And when the cost of things go up and up and up, you just think of your constituents as a giant piggy bank. So people don't know how to argue. People will gaslight you. People in power live to gaslight you, patronize you, because they don't want you to know about the civil servant part. You put them into power. You pay their salary. They're supposed to work for you. And yet people shy away from this and give them a paper crown to wear where they now think they're superior. And that's not why you have a civil service. That's not why you have politicians. They're not your mom and dad. You give them a mandate where we want this, this, and this, and away you go. But you have to keep an eye on people, especially people in power. The more power somebody has, the more they need to be scrutinized. And a long time ago, we used to have a press that would do this to some degree. But when you have a government trying to regulate that press, they're trying to co-opt them. They pay for them by funded. In Canada, they're funded. They're not going to go against any level of government because that's their sugar daddy. So we don't have a legacy press that understands this. They want the paper crown. They don't want to make waves. So we're in this odd bubble that cannot last forever. And one of the things that's bursting this bubble for everybody involved, and ironically, the big tech bros who are fighting for this are the ones that are going to end up having this blow in their face, is AI. Because once you open that Pandora's box, you can't close it. So AI was released too soon. It wasn't quite ready, but big tech had no other real innovations, and they were losing their clout and prestige. So they grabbed on to AI not quite while it was ready. I mean, it's incredible, but it wasn't at the point where you can say, okay, we can unleash this. But what's done is done. And it can do an awful lot of things. And if you have listened to my podcast, or if you've read my blog, or if you played my games, you know that I am very much pro AI. I'm not one of these people that says this is terrible, but I am not blind to certain things. So this was released earlier. This is why people take on, go, oh, this makes this mistake. That, well, so do you, first of all. And, we still keep you around. And second of all, things improve. Things get faster, they get smaller, they get more powerful. Version 1.0 is pretty damn impressive. Version 2.0 would be even better. But when you release something before it is truly ready, you cannot predict the consequences. You cannot rig things the same way. And what AI can do, even at this point, it can take anybody and turn them into the CEO of their own company. People go, well, AI is taking, the grunt jobs. Yes, but it can also take this. And as somebody who started my own company, I can say this. AI is better at replacing CEOs than it is regular workers. Because when you don't have customer service, you lose people. When you have AI that's inaccurate, you lose people. That's, tiny, tiny grains, and that's not where AI shines. AI is a big picture thinker. It can take CEO jobs and make them totally obsolete, which would be an enormous benefit. When empires fall, there's a 20-year period of unprecedented growth and freedom because you're not shepherding and herding or livestocking the little people. They're free to do what they want. They come up with ideas that they wouldn't have come up with under a patriarchal authoritarian system. So you have countries like Australia foolishly saying, okay, we're not going to let people under 14 use social media. Sure. So then your workforce will be more inept than other countries that allow it because that becomes innate. We will see an evolution of social media because it will not stay in its current form because it breeds narcissism. And now you've brought in AI, which is the antidote to narcissism. It tears down delusions of grandeur, and it really exposes people for their fear of insignificance. So a lot of things, the economy, people think it's going to crash and burn. It will correct itself. And I don't mean correction like the stock market where things go down. Housing is inflated. Prices are inflated. Those prices will go down because it's like a shell game. It's like a pyramid scheme. And eventually a pyramid collapses. So there is actually a lot to look forward to in 2026 on a big scale. On a smaller scale for me personally, released a new game. I'm working on 3 other games right now. So I'm busy. I'm doing other things too. It's not just the gaming part. I'm doing more podcasts. I am doing other things. So it's a very exciting time for me. It wasn't what I expected because 2025 was not a very great year for me. I can't say it was a horrible year, but there were things that happened to me that I'm very resentful. So I have bigger news, which I can share later on. I had to postpone something because I couldn't, I can't always pull a rabbit out of my hat. And I thought one path was close to me, and then I found out it wasn't. I did have a book published, Narrative Criminology, that came out in 2025. I wasn't going to publish another book, but I had notes based on KlueIQ. And I said, you know what? This can be put in a book form. People ask me, am I ever going to write a book again? I do have one more book in me. It's fiction though. And I'm debating, do I want it? Do I want to do it as a game? So I'm not at that point yet where I can say. So that was good. I started my company, KlueIQ, which was incredible. Unfortunately, not everything went accordingly. I was doing extremely well with teaching kintsugi. When I started in the beginning of the year, every month was my record breaking month. And then in the US, they hit Canada with tariffs. So I went from a spectacular record breaking month to zero. This is how much it impacted my teaching. Now, first of all, I love teaching kintsugi. I find it therapeutic to teach. I love teaching it to other people. And it was something I could do remotely and I could reach a lot of people. So it meant a lot to me. But once that was taken away from me, it was very infuriating. That was completely unnecessary and it made me mad. You're doing something that means something to you, and then it gets taken away through no fault of your own. And then it stymies you in so many different ways. So it took me a long time to reset while doing a company, and I didn't do as many podcast interviews that I usually do. So it was a very quiet year for that. So I didn't do other people's podcasts. I started to do my own again. So I tend to go through cycles. So I had to make decisions of where I want to be in 2026 because 2025 was not a good year for me overall. It was groundbreaking in many ways, but it was uneven. From 2020 to 2024 was pretty good. 2025 was, where and this happens, you make plans, you build slowly, you're very strategic of things happen, and yet still things can scuttle you. And I said, that doesn't stop me, but it does get tiresome of having to deal with messes that kind of come out of the blue. And, I've had that multiple times in my life where it was not foreseeable. And sometimes people go, well, you don't want to take, is it because you can't admit? No, I make mistakes like anybody else. I don't, but I adjust, I adapt. I'm much more fluid. I don't put my ego on it. But there are things that they're just bizarre. Now, one minute you're fine, the next minute you get a cancer diagnosis where you're told, okay, you're not going to live very long. And then, okay, and then you do. You get cured and it's not what you expected. So I've gotten reprieves in my life. I had everything set and then something just, 2018, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. It was an out of the blue diagnosis. And if you know anything about ovarian cancer, by the time you get symptoms, it's too late. I stumbled upon mine. It was totally by accident. My mother had been diagnosed with cancer 3 weeks prior. And she was like, you have to go get checked up. You have to go because she was panicking. And I said, okay, I will do this for you. So I told my doctor knew. She goes, okay, let's give you, an ultrasound because that's totally unintrusive and it will make your mother happy. And that's how I found out. It was the results they saw and it wasn't a good kind of tumor. But odd thing was it was covered by a benign tumor that prevented any spread. So I didn't need chemo. I didn't need radiation. They just took out my left ovary. And my mother had chemo and she's fine. So from, death sentence to, okay, what now? But in 2018, I had my comeback book when journalism was a thing. I was getting ready to do the publicity. I was ready to get back into writing because I had to look after my grandmother. It was just a cascading catastrophe. So I had to put my career on hold. I was in a car accident. And all sorts of things. And I was a passenger at a red light. Car hit me. It was a hit and run. It just didn't even break. So it was one thing after another, after another. And, people think, you're saying this was out of my control. I prefer when I make the mistake because I can correct it. When it's somebody else, it's out of your hands. And I don't like that. Because you can fix it when it's you. When it's outside factor, you have a lot more work to be done. So I went through all this and just as you set yourself, okay, I have this plan. Okay. Shutdowns with COVID. Okay. I got to, adjust, get everything going. Okay. We're going to have tariffs. It's like we are ruled by people who are perpetually selfish and immature. They have this idea with no experience, no real work reality experience. And then they just come up with things so they can benefit, but who cares about you? And there's a point in your life where you say, this is not acceptable. You have no idea what you're doing, and you expect other people to bow and bend to you until they break because that makes you feel good. And that's not a way to run a company. It's not a way to run a city or a country or anything else. So this 2026, because AI was released in desperation, because big tech didn't have anything new to offer, so out came AI because analytical people didn't want to let go of their dominance, which they've had since the Second World War. And I've written about this. One of my textbooks from 2024 was The Political Psychology of the Second World War, where I talk about how it was primal dominance and then Second World War shifted to analytical. But since 2020, we have our brains are in an emotional scaffolding, but it's not obvious. So 2026 will be a year where this becomes increasingly obvious because people have had enough. You cannot keep bombarding people with propaganda, with impositions, with inflation, with job insecurity, scaring people with AI. It just gets ridiculous. So you have people complaining, well, AI is, copyright infringement. That can be correct. You don't stop the technology for an issue that can be easily resolved. You can fix about compensation, but you don't stop the technology. So we threw something not quite when it should have been. It should have been waited about 4 or 5 years, but there was a panic. And so they unleashed it much sooner than all the copycats took it without actually having a deep understanding of it. I studied it. I was one of the people when I went to university way before anybody else thought it was cool. I took a class in this, programmed things. I ran experiments with AI. So I'm very well versed. So you can see where things are headed. You have this absolutely incredible tool that has to kind of, it's almost like I liken AI. It had to be on its own at 15 instead of, after graduating from university. And it needs extra love and care. But that doesn't mean that it's flawed beyond fixing. Actually, there's a lot actually of benefits. When you're out in the real world and you're out there, you get ecological validity. So even though it was put out a little too soon, what it does, what the feedback will be actually be a lot better inadvertently. But what it's doing now is competition for narcissists who are addicted to social media. They cannot stand it because all their sophistry can be, put to shame and their thoughts can be automated by software. This is frightening to these people. So we'll be seeing a lot of this. We'll be seeing a lot more, downfalls of a lot more politicians because they can't deliver. They're trying to pull every trick in the book, but people, even if they're not fully aware, they understand on some level that they're being scammed. And as the more and more people struggle because they're competitive, because they're jealous, and you see all these politicians and CEOs live it up, they're not going to like them. They're not going to look up to them. They're not going to suck up to them for a job because a big tech that used to, grab all these people right out of, university, they're like, well, we don't need you. We have AI. That doesn't endear you to future generations. And the younger people say, okay, you're not trustworthy. You're not the future. And this is what people in C-suite and big tech don't understand. They're not the future. They're the present. It's not like technology is going to go away. Contrary, you're going to see a lot more smaller companies start to gain dominance because they actually have the right. They're not an analytical mindset. They're an emotional mindset. And emotional is not irrational. So we'll be seeing a lot more things getting corrected, getting set straight, not by grand design or plan, just because of how things are in a mess and people feeling like their noses are being rubbed by people who pretended to know what they were doing and they have no clue. So expect to see new kind of leadership. Expect to see new kinds of players out on the scene. It will be more garage band type of people. Little rough around the edges, shoot from the hip. They don't care about the number of likes they have. They're just look to solving problems. So that is all I have to say for myself on this special edition. Hope you have a wonderful New Year's, and I will talk to you next time. Ta ta for now.